I'm not Mean Gene. Okay, so I assume that you are all here for the indie game development panel, right? No one's missed in the wrong spot or anything. Okay, so I've been lucky enough to have experience over the past 10 years, both in indie game development and in AAA studios. I just got out of a contract with a very, very, very big studio of, by the way, which we can't say for NDA reasons. Yes, so don't say it by mistake. But take my word for it, I'm not a liar. You guess. So who here is actually interested in being a game developer? Show of hands. Okay, who here has made anything? Mods, their own projects, anything? Excellent. Has anybody done like a completed project or completed project?
Yep.
What have you done?
The last thing I shipped was VVVV 2.2 for Windows MAGFest.
Cool. There you go. I know I'm just gonna go with
I usually do V and that's it. I think it's what Terry says it is actually. So
V.
just V.
Just V. Okay. That's fair. I can get behind that. Anyone else ship anything? No? So, oh, look at that. Looks like they're helping us out even further. Look at this. So, like a cup of coffee. So first things first, one thing that everyone sort of fails to understand going into the indie gaming world is that making a project is actually difficult, like really difficult. A lot of people equate making games to playing games. There is a very little bit of truth in it, but only a little bit. Making games is hard work. End of story. I used to try to convince friends that I knew who also loved games, hey, come make a project with me. And I probably went through about 30 or 40 friends who would be like, yeah, day one, absolutely, let's create some characters, let's come up with a plot, let's do it. And then by like the second week, they were like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. Well, guess what? 2 weeks does not a game make. So if you're going to make something, you got to really be in it for some sort of long haul. Even if that long haul is only a couple months to get like a small demo going, that's still a long haul. Don't give up on projects. A lot of times people will start a project and then they see a lot of other indie games that just look better than theirs, sound better than theirs, and they lose hope, right? And they're just like, my game will never be this good, so they give up on it. But that's not really what indie gaming is about. Indie game is not about failure. Well, actually, it kind of is, because most people fail a lot. Who here has seen Indie Game the movie? Who here liked Indie Game the movie? It's a good movie, it's just not actually representative of how things work in the industry. Everybody they focused on in that movie all went on to have hit games. It's not actually how it works in the indie world. For every 1,000 games made, one might get some notoriety, and that's it. So your odds of making it big out of it is probably 1 in like 5,000 in reality. And most of the games that do wind up getting noticed usually have some sort of gimmick or something attached to it that catches people's eyes. Now, if you think about like all the IGF and IndieCade winners over the past 5, 6, 7 years, like every winner has like a gimmick, right? Like Journey, there was no real action. Braid was time-based puzzle mechanics, and Fez was 2D, 3D shifting. And so every game had some gimmick to reinventing the wheel to some degree to make it seen by the community. Because if you're just making a game that's like, say, a Mega Man clone, it could be a great game that's lots of fun, just know it's going to get lost in the shuffle. So if your goal is to make something where your end goal is to actually get noticed, and people will write about your work, and Rock, Paper, Shotgun will call you a genius, then you got to think of something ludicrous and outside of the realm of normal regularity, or else it's just going to fall to the wayside. Which is a shame, and I think that's a big downside. Indie gaming is not a perfect world. I assume you feel the same way.
Well, yeah, definitely not being a perfect world. I mean, you'll hear a lot of stuff. So a little bit of backstory on the two of us. We went in on a game together in 2005. The original Neon FM was a dance game, and we ended up getting screwed pretty bad. But it's because we went in.
My butt still hurts.
Yeah. We went in with the idea of we wanted to make some video games and just leave it at that. the thing is, if you want to design a video game, you're going to have to also be a project manager, you're going to have to be a producer, and you're going to have to market yourself. And these are all things that you really just can't ignore or hope to pass on off on someone else. And just, if you want to make video games, you also have to be in business more or less. That's why I went and got my MBA. But being more of a business type, when you're talking about like the odds of success and all that, I don't really subscribe to the notion that like you're going to fail exactly 0.05. You're going to be successful 0.05% of the time, that sort of thing. You know, the reality is either you succeed or you don't. You know, so well, statistics are irrelevant for the individual is the thing. So my point is, perseverance is really much more important. I mean, if you, let's say you do fail, if you just keep trying, eventually, hopefully you'll succeed, or you know, hey, you know.
Maybe the failure will continue.
No, but as long as you persevere, and as long as you keep trying different things, and you don't just keep making the same mistake over and over, you will get somewhere eventually. But I would say go into stuff with the intent of first marketing your game. After you come up with a concept, figure out how you're going to sell that concept before you start worrying about sprite sheets and your amazing physics model and all that sort of stuff, because that ultimately is going to decide your success more so than any game mechanic.
That's true, but also on a side note, some people just want to make stuff for themselves, like as a, hobbies, projects. In which case, none of that matters. You can just do whatever you want, and literally nothing matters in terms of what the public may or may not like, or what's sellable in today's marketplace. So if you just want to make stuff on the side, just to play around and see characters you've designed come to life, go nuts. Doesn't matter. None of the business stuff matters. But if you want to try to sell it, then he's absolutely right. You have to think outside of the realm of just creating characters you like and stories you find appealing. And also remember, things you like aren't necessarily things everyone else is going to like. But that's a whole other topic of discussion.
Are you planning to talk about how to get jobs in the industry?
I am.
Okay, so I'll say that.
Awesome. Working with small teams, I find to be preferable no matter what the situation is. That's my opinion. For indie groups, it's very obviously easy because your overhead for a small group of friends is much cheaper than trying to run like a big studio. I tend to think it works even in the AAA model, where the studio just came out of. They have this business model, or this development model, where anybody in the company can put their fingers in the pie. So you can just walk into a meeting about a thing and insert your opinions, and your opinions are just as relevant and heard as everyone else's. Which sounds good, but the problem is when you have a company of like 1,600 people, and you have to ship products regularly, stuff just never gets done on time. So while the end quality of the product is solid for allowing so many people to have input, it really does hurt both your player base and your company's brand by never shipping anything on time, and or just not shipping something at all because it just gets caught up in developmental hell for so long. Does that make sense to everybody? So I personally like smaller teams. I think it works best that way. I think companies in general should take whatever models they have and take them granularly down to smaller teams and have all those teams work together, as opposed to having one manager and then like 70 people underneath that manager. But that's just my opinion, and that's just what I've seen from my experience, which of course is not perfect. So if you've never developed anything and you want to just jump in and get started, my first advice is to make something very small. I've gotten a lot of questions from people who come to me and say, hey, I really like a lot of your work. I was thinking about doing like a Mega Man clone, where do you think I should start? And I always say the same thing, is don't start with a Mega Man clone. Mega Man is more difficult than you think it is to make. I usually tell people start with stuff like Breakout or Pong if you want to clone something, because it's easier, it's smaller, and you'll get it done quicker, so you're not stuck in like some endless cycle of trying to learn this big project. You can make a Pong clone in a week, no problem, right? So it'll A, help you learn to create, and B, it'll allow you to finish a small project, which will give you the confidence to move on to something bigger. But I promise you, your first game should not be Final Fantasy 22. I know a lot of people try that. It really, I promise you, is not a good idea, no matter how determined you think you are. If you've never developed for anything before, that's not a good place to start. It's going to be nothing but heartache and pain the whole way, I promise. Thoughts on that?
Well, okay, so definitely you shouldn't make an RPG for your first game. Even if you're talking about stuff like RPG Maker, you start to quickly realize how much scripting actually goes into these games and how much writing is involved. Another thing is, if you're going to make a game, in the past I used to kind of look down on stuff like Game Maker and all these other things that make it really easy to get into games, but the fact of the matter is, if you're starting out, your design is going to be a lot more important than whatever engine you use. And just do whatever makes things easiest and quickest for you, but it doesn't look like complete bud. I'm still not a big fan of Flash, but just use whatever you can do to get your ideas out there. And I agree, do something small, because these things tend to exponentially increase in the amount of time you think it's going to take, especially when you're wearing every hat of development too.
Like it. Team Fortress 2, just wearing all the hats.
That's game dev in a nutshell.
That's pretty much it. First, hire a heavy guy, and then hire someone that likes fire. Sorry, my notes are constantly. So yeah, now don't get me wrong. A lot of the advice I'm giving is very much like don't try to do this, or keep realistic expectations when doing that. But realistically, the most important part of all of game development is that you love what you do. I'm lucky enough to do what I love for a living, and so is Eric. And if you get to that point, you should be too. Because if you don't love games, then you just shouldn't be in the industry. But if you do, then welcome aboard and never give up trying. I had a lot of games that were complete failures in terms of exposure to the communities and AAA developers noticing. And I'm probably known for like 3 or 4 different games, and I've made about 40. And at best, you guys probably know me for like 1 or 2 of those 3 or 4 that you may know me for. So you can see that the ratio of success to not success is already not very well. And for someone who's been doing it for so long, no less. So just don't get discouraged by trying something and having it not work. It's just always love what you do, and you'll never give up by default. And that's, I think, actually by far and away the most important piece of advice I can give anyone ever.
Eric is kind of who I had in mind when I was thinking of, if you're going to make 100 games, you can expect maybe one of them to be successful, but perseverance again is the key when you're doing this sort of thing. I think the main way you can keep your morale up, though, is especially in indie dev, you have many fewer restrictions than you would on a AAA level. You don't have to, there's like a checklist of things you need to hit on AAA games. We were, at one point, we were in contact with Midway. We were in contact with a guy who played Johnny Cage. And this was it before MK4 or after?
And it was way after MK4.
Okay.
This was probably around MK6 or 7.
Oh, okay, well, it was before MK9, so Mortal Kombat was still terrible. And and I think Midway kind of knew it. But we had talked to these people, and we pitched Midway the idea of doing a new 2D Mortal Kombat with pre-rendered graphics, all that, digitized people. Midway loved the idea, got a lot of people on board, and we go to pitch it to the people we were working with, our main distributor, and they cut me off like one sentence in and said, we have no appetite for that sort of game. Fighters aren't popular. And that's sort of the ignorance you're going to be dealing with when you're outside of indie, is that you're going to get a bunch of suits who look at numbers and they say, well, the heavens say these games will be successful and these ones won't. And as a result, you're not going to see a lot of blockbuster titles come out of AAA. You're going to see all like the real breakthrough stuff, like Minecraft and all, come out of the indie scene, because those are the people who are actually trying new things. And then you'll see the AAAs come in before after 8.
That's about right. There's on related to that note, one of the people that I'm teaming with now on my current project is he currently works at the company I just left, and he also used to work on, does anyone remember the game City of Heroes? He was the director at City of Heroes at Paragon Studios. And he likes to think, he thinks with a AAA studio head. So like we have characters in this game we're doing and all these characters are ghosts and have died in different ways. And there's one with a little girl who's hung with a noose around her neck. And he's like, from a AAA standpoint, we wouldn't put that kind of thing into a game because of this, and this. It might say, hey, this person is completely or committed suicide, and suicide is a real issue, and kids dying is like a, in the game industry. And then there's another character who is beheaded and he keeps his head on the end of his walking staff. And he's like, well, with all the ISIS beheadings, that character might, and like that's exactly the kind of thing you get from AAA. There's a lot of these, like, let's connect as many points as possible to try and politically correct whatever you're doing. And in indie, you have complete freedom. So that is definitely something worth exploring for any projects that you decide to move forward with in your time. Because that is a big perk of indie, is not having walls.
I think that also that's part of Bethesda's strategy in doing modability in all their games, because I know the first mod I installed were Bethesda games, the Kill Children mod.
Classic. I myself have killed many children. I thought that was like a to a story, just...
I was giving you a moment of silence.
Just children of murder. Gotcha. All right, yeah. Let's move forward with it. Children of murder. All right. Well, one thing to keep in note too, and if you're going to look at taking any game into a world of selling it and making profit, and you're trying to get to the business end, is that the indie world is really crowded now. In the same way that mobile apps, right? Remember when mobile apps were new and everyone was like, hey, let's start doing mobile games, but now go on iTunes and it's just so overcrowded. Well, indie is the same way now. The indie world is just insanely crowded with popular stuff and with complete failures. Like, what is it, The War Z? Is that what that was? Does anyone know that game I'm talking about? Yeah.
Vaguely, yeah.
So, in the world of indie gaming, this is a lot of the reason why IGF and Indiecade winners are usually games that do something really wacky or off the wall or unique, is because that's what separates you from the pack, right? Because there's already a world of indie games. What can you do that allows the rest of the world to see what is unique enough about your project? Which again is why you get braids and fez and things like that.
One of the things you should probably keep in mind as an indie developer is keep your customer in mind and why someone would want to play your game. At one point, when I was developing for Xbox Live Indie Arcade, I think literally at least 7 out of the top 10 were all Minecraft clones.
Yep, I remember that.
And that's great and all, but like, why would someone... People play indie games because they want something new and different that the larger studios can't do, for the reasons we just talked about. They don't want to go indie just because they really want it done in Minecraft. So I would keep in mind who your audience is. Your audience is going to be a lot more forgiving of the stuff you do, and they're going to come into your stuff with a much more open mind than they would another Halo game. So feel free to kind of go crazy with your indie stuff, because that's, I think, what appeals more to your audience.
Also of note, and this is a fun story, but something very important to learn. So I told you this yesterday, in fact, about a friend of mine that I met at the last AAA studio I worked at, Tyson. He was pretty high up at that company, and I was like, one day when goofing around with him, because he and I both have like dad joke humor, so we're constantly poking at each other with the dumbest crap and watching each other laugh like hyenas. So one day, this crazy friend of mine who sits next to me, he says, hey, what did you do before you got here? He's like, well, I didn't work for several years, but before that, I was at a different game company. And I was like, oh, cool, what company were you at? He was like, PopCap. So it turns out Tyson was the 5th employee at PopCap and got there before Bejeweled. So where I'm going with this is that 5 years he took off between companies was really just him surfing around Bahamas in mansions, like surfing in the mansions. He just... Tyson is pretty much loaded, as it turns out. But he taught me an interesting thing about his work at PopCap. Because I said, what's the most interesting thing you learned while working there? And he said that all the PopCap games, everything from Bejeweled to Plants vs. Zombies, the demo versions of those games were done with literally no artwork. They were just like colored shapes on a screen. And they would never start to develop themes or art or animation or anything for any project until the core, whatever that block game was fun. And every time they put together a project and they would decide it's not fun and they try changing things. And a game might just be a colored block game for 10 months before everyone in the studio is like, yeah, this is a lot of fun. We're really ready to do something with it now. And then they layer stuff like plants and zombies on top of that. So that's a route that you can certainly take before putting a lot of effort into character art and sprites and animations and backgrounds. You can do the same thing. If you're trying to do something new or you need something puzzle related or just trying out something that's never been done before, if you're clever enough to come up with something unique, you don't need to polish it up for just a demo to see if it's any fun. Do it with colored shapes. Worked for PopCap, apparently.
When he says a demo, he doesn't mean an external demo, by the
No.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't put that out there for the people to see. But I agree in some respects. I think that some art, at least, is important to sort of get the feel of your game down. But there's definitely a lot of putting the cart before the horse in amateur game design, because he's right. You don't know what's going to be fun until you actually play it. You can have the greatest concept in the world, but until you execute it, you don't know.
Was it about killing children?
Not this time.
Perhaps next time.
Yeah, it was totally there. I'll interrupt you in a couple minutes.
That's fine. Or at like 3 in the morning when you wake up in the middle of the night and just remember it. So I did something to get noticed by a AAA developer. I did something and I did it on purpose. Does anybody here actually know any of the games that I've made? Really?
Halo Combat Evolved, Left 4 Dead, there was an 8-bit version of that. There was also, a long time ago, you did an 8-bit video game or a tribute game.
Mm-hmm.
There was also a DJ Hero one.
Mm-hmm.
That one's gone since missing.
Yep.
I don't think Activision cared for that one.
It wasn't Activision. It was Sony Music.
Oh, really?
It was Sony Music. We shut it down.
Oh my gosh. There was that.
Yeah, they hated my 8-bit chiptunes. But yeah, very good. I mean, you actually know a number of them. So I didn't make fan games by mistake. I mean, yes, I made fan games of those games because I love those games. I didn't just make fan games of stuff I didn't care for. But I did it on purpose so that I would build up a resume of stuff that people would be able to point to and remember seeing. Eventually, I released, like the top of my fan game career was Team Fortress Arcade. And that got me some calls and interviews with some bigger developers, one of which led to that AAA studio work I did this past year. But yeah, I had a strategy in mind, which was if I make stuff for projects I like, A, the project will end up better because I like it, and B, it'll give me, fans of that game, you already have a built-in audience, right? So Pixel Force Left 4 Dead, the Nintendo version of Left 4 Dead, the Left 4 Dead fans are already going to like it to some extent because they're Left 4 Dead fans. I had a built-in audience going in. With an original property, you don't have that. So you definitely get bonus fans just for making something people already recognize. So by actual accident, I released the first trailer for that game the night Left 4 Dead 2 came out. So I got like 2 million hits on that YouTube video in the first like 48 hours or something. So that was a coincidental thing that happened. But if you can purposely time stuff like that, that's even better. Mine was a happy mistake, but it doesn't have to be a mistake. You can always look for that. So that's something to bear in mind, that if you're looking to be noticed, you want your work to be caught and people to really see it, rather than just coming up with your own characters. Find a game you love, make a fan game out of it. It doesn't have to be a big hand-painted 3D model game, right? Pixel 4 series was all Nintendo remakes,
Didn't you also get in touch with Valve because of some of those games?
Yes.
And last company you were at also got in touch with you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've made many AAA studio friends because of those games. One of which is a funny side story to the taking down of Pixel Force DJ Hero. So I got a cease and desist letter in the email from Sony Music. And I was like, that first off, the songs I'm using are all 80 songs. And these are 8-bit mashup chiptunes. I'm not selling them. I don't really think they're cutting into your profits. And the dude says, well, it doesn't matter. It's just we have the license and you just can't have it. And I said, well, is there nothing we can work out? He's like, well, if you give us like I said, it was like $450,000 in licensing. No! So I told that guy, literally, not even in nice words, I told that guy to fuck off. And that he was a piece of shit and his company could burn in hell. So then a friend of mine who works in game journalism was like, I have to get those emails from you. People will love to see this story. So I gave it to him. And so those emails that went viral, and I got a call from Devolver Digital, who works with like a Serious Sam series and some other stuff. And then the dude was like, hey man, I run Devolver and I just wanted to let you know those emails were gold. He's like, you're great, you want to do a project together? Yes! That was all it took, was to give the middle finger to Sony, and then that got me a project. That paid pretty well, no less. So, yes, please.
Okay, so we do not condone. A lot of these companies, when you have something licensed, you have a legal obligation to go out and be obnoxious about it. Because if you don't, you forfeit the ability to go do that later.
That's true.
That's actually part of why like the whole Dead Mouse versus Disney thing is going on now.
Yep.
As stupid as it is, Disney knows it's stupid, and they're not doing it because they hate Dead Mouse. They're doing it because right now there's millions of Chinese knockoffs of Mickey Mouse, and they lose their ability to tell people to stop that if they let any perceived slight go down. So I doubt Disney's going to try overly hard to win that lawsuit. They have to at least make a show. So probably the guy who mailed Eric was not a piece of shit.
He was. He was a lawyer.
There are some good ones. But I'd say keep that in mind.
That lawyers are shit.
The main thing I wanted to say here actually is if you put out a fan game and you get a cease and desist, it's not because the studio hates you. It's not because they want to shut down your thing. It's because they have a legal obligation to put out the cease and desist. Now, usually when people get a cease and desist, they cease and desist. I kind of recommend you don't do that. If you get a cease and desist, wait until someone actually threatens to take you to court. And the cease and desist is kind of a threat to take you to court. But I'm saying like, wait until you get a document saying you are hereby summoned to do this. Yeah, then think about doing something. Because the cease and desist is kind of customary. They have to do it to protect them.
On a side note, lawyers. He was a dick. You can find the emails. Like I said, it became like this big thing, and a bunch of game sites reported. I think Gamma Sutra reported it, and you can find those emails. They are fun. But yeah, I was lucky in that most of the IP I chose to work with, the companies that own those IP had publicly come out and said, "Yeah, it's cool as long as you're not selling that stuff. You know, that's fine." Like Valve, actually.
Well, didn't Valve offer to let you sell it?
Yeah, a little late. So Team Fortress Arcade had like 1.2 million downloads or something, and then Robin Walker was like, "Hey man, we love that game. You should totally sell it." Robin. Fucking Robin. Tweet. All right, so if your goal is to get noticed and end up in a larger studio, or to work AAA, keep in mind the differences between AAA and indie. Freedom is the biggest thing. Being able to cross boundaries, and indie games are more like an art form, and AAA games are more like commercialism at its finest. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are good AAA games. I'm not knocking AAA games in general, because there are certainly great examples of them. But it's kind of a good way to think of things in terms of where the cage walls sit. Of course, indie, you don't make as much money, but you get more freedom. AAA, you make guaranteed better money, but not as much freedom. So you just basically got to figure out what works for you, right? If you're like, you know what, as long as I'm making stuff and I've got a regular paycheck, I'll do anything you say. Winston Zedmore, 1981.
Actually, on the topic of money, you can make a lot more money in indie than you can in AAA.
Well,
as an individual, unless you own the AAA company. I'm just saying the potential's there. I'm not saying it's likely, but with a AAA studio, you have a salary, so you have a guaranteed amount of money.
mm-hmm.
With indie, like obviously Notch, the big names in indie paid a lot more than they would have if they had developed it under a studio.
True, but how many notches are there? versus
I
how
mean,
many
there's
indie
5
games.
notches.
Yes, but well, classic 5 people named Notch. Yes, hypothetically, you could become a zillionaire off of the next version of Minecraft. But realistically, of the thousands and thousands of indie games that get released a year, the odds of you becoming Notch are not good. So on the whole, you will probably be making more money working a regular job. I made more money at the AAA studio I was at, or the AAA studios I have been at, than I have in my indie days. So personal experience, I can back that up. White guy. Is everybody on par with us so far? Any questions, any thoughts, concerns?
So for making fan-made games, how do you feel about making a fan-made game but just changing all the art and changing all the names? Would that actually avoid cease and desist letters?
As long as the mechanic behind the game is not something that's like trademarked. Like for example, Neon FM is a great example of that with the DDR thing. But yeah, if I was thinking about making a game about a female character named like Mego Girl, and like just having it be exactly like Mega Man, but very clearly, and then there was the Kickstarter for the Mighty Number 9 project that came along, so I dropped the idea because that's literally what Mighty Number 9 is. But yeah, you can have the same exact. I've seen lots of games that are literally the game they're parodying with just a parody name, and that's okay.
Well, parodies themselves also have some idea of projection.
Mm-hmm.
But if you change the assets, I mean, I can't really think of any game that you could not just change the graphics. In a lot of cases, you don't even have to change the graphics. There was a landmark case with like Amusement World versus Atari, I believe, and that was with Asteroids versus an Asteroids clone way back in the day. And basically, the Amusement World game was developed by Eric Holender's father. So we have him to blame for a lot of the clones in the industry now. But it was just Asteroids in color. But he won that case, and as a result, you have 50 different Minecraft clones on Xbox that have indie games. So I would say Eric ran afoul of the law because he was using adaptations of people's copyrighted works and all that. Legend of Zelda and Halo projects get shut down because they use Link and they use those characters who, whenever you create something, you have an implied copyright or implied trademark on these characters, whether you actually want to do it or not. So any like character name and exact character design is probably protected. But yeah, if the people who were making Legend of Zelda and Halo Wars or the fan projects had just changed the assets around, you could totally say it was a different game.
The Legend of Zuba, that would be great. Any other questions, Ray?
You said you had worked on up to 40 games, but you don't seem very old, so I'm kind of wondering, like, how long, like, because I've worked on some games and they take at least a full semester, usually more like a year if you want really good, 2 years. Like, how have you worked on 40 games?
Okay, so that's a great question. And the first answer is thank you for saying I don't look old. And the second one is I'm already married, sorry. And the third one is, so not all the game projects were gigantic. I mean, some of them were big, like Pixel Force Left 4 Dead took like several months of full-time work to make. Mega Man Rocks was also one that took several months worth of work. Team Fortress Arcade, several months worth of work. But some of them were small projects. I did a game called Super Eurojet, which was a side-scrolling like space shooter type of game. In that game, I entered. There was this indie competition. It's like, what kind of game can you make in 5 days, right, Monday through Friday? And so I got in on it late and started Wednesday and finished the project in 4 days. It's not a particularly sizable game. It's only got 3 stages, but it's got like a boss after each stage and title screen, victory screen, all that stuff. Upgrade system. So I mean, it's all very simple, but I mean, it's there. So when I say I've made 40 games, I don't mean I've made 40 huge games. I've probably made 10 huge games and then 30 small stuff.
Well, a lot of your games are made with
Game Maker.
Yeah, with
Game Maker Studio.
and stuff that really speeds along the dev process.
Mm-hmm.
So if you make like 4 games a year, which is totally possible, it takes you about 10 years.
Yeah.
And you've been doing it.
So I hope that answers your question.
Where did you publish those games to? You said they like got noticed and like people were actually like buying into them and stuff. Like, how did you get people catch this game?
All right, so at first it's basically sort of a get your foot in the door sort of thing. Because my first several games got like nothing. Nobody get like my first game that I made on my own. That was my own property, my own IP called Return of the Space Cowboy, and it was a big game for 10 stages and all this stuff going on, the story and animated cutscenes between each stage, and that game got like 20 downloads, right? And that took me a long time to make. So for a long time, nobody looked at anything at all, right? So then what I did was I started like trying to poke at people at like, like news sites like Kotaku and Give Us a Drone, Joystick. You can send in like news tips, hey, I heard this. So I started doing that. And for the first couple of projects, it yielded no results. But for Pixel Force Left 4 Dead, it did. And they wrote about it. And then Game Informer called me up and wanted to do an interview. So I did a phone interview with Game Informer. And then Game Informer, like a month later, ran a best fan-made games of all time list, and Pixel Force Left 4 Dead made #2, which I was really happy about. So I've got that issue in my filing cabinet at home. So not online. I have an actual printed magazine with that in it. It's one of my proud moments. But once you've got one thing you've done that people know, then it becomes much easier. Because then when I did Pixel Force Halo, and I sent that tip in, to Joystick Kotaku, I wrote about it very quickly. The maker of Pixel Force Left 4 Dead does a new Pixel Force game, doing Halo this time. Same thing all over again. And the next one, Team Fortress Arcade. Yeah, it does Team Fortress Arcade, And so once I got one in, now if I send something into Kotaku about something I do, they're almost guaranteed to write about it because now I have name presence from all the other times. So breaking through that first time, pain in the ass. Everything since then has been pretty easy.
And also, I agree. I think the more concise way to say it is you need a network.
Yes.
Especially, we have a pretty large game development community in Baltimore because we have Bethesda to the south, we have Firaxis up north, we have ZeniMax up north also now.
Big Huge just got rebranded.
They were Impossible Studios and then they got shut down again.
Again, really?
Yeah,
Ouch.
yeah. But point being,
Zynga also has a studio there.
no.
Really? What the hell happened?
There was one in Oda.
Yeah. So point being, you have all these studios. You also have like a professional game testing location up in Timon. So there's this network forming there, and then you have IGDA, which is an International Game Developers Association.
Oh God, yeah.
And they have a chapter. They meet 4 times a year, usually at Green Turtle in Hunt Valley. But I would definitely go to IGDA's website. And they have these meetings, and I think the last meeting I went to, they had one of the guys who worked on Unreal talking about stuff.
Probably.
Yeah, and so you get all these developers, Tronster from Firaxis,
Electron,
yeah, people from ZeniMax and ZeniMax and Bethesda were all there. So you get all these devs in one room, and they're all chit-chatting, and you can just go up to anybody and say, hey, I've got this idea for a game, or ask them for advice. Schmooze, that sort of thing. If you're an introvert, like I am, it's a little bit more difficult. You need to sort of force yourself to go out there
Get yourself an air bird.
and talk to people. Yeah, or just attach yourself to that.
That's how, like, when we first started business together, that's how it always worked. Whenever we went anywhere, I was the talker, and he would just stand by my side, and occasionally, just like we're doing now, I would do those things, just chime in on occasion.
Yeah, but networking is extremely important in any industry, but it's especially important in the games industry because the community tends to be so insular. Especially indie games tends to be very insular. And journalism is, gaming journalism anyway, is also extremely insular. So you have a small network of sites, everyone knows each other. So as soon as you get one thing published in one easy, you're going to start getting everywhere.
Yep. Any questions so far?
Yeah, what's your opinion on game jams? I know we already sort of talked about the month-long project, but I feel like there's a lot going on in that space with Looting Day happening 3 times a week, and MAGFest is actually going to be hosting Global Game Jam, I think, next year. So I guess just your opinion on that, and have you participated? I think we touched on that once.
I judged a game jam once. I haven't participated in one.
Okay.
But yeah, game jams are fantastic. I love game jams. That's why, like, the competition I was talking about with the week-long game development, it was sort of like a week-long game jam. And that's a great place. If you know of any game jams going on in and around your area, you don't even have to participate. Just go. Just go see what people are doing. Because you don't have to be an expert in anything to participate in those and come up with something that will win you some kind of notoriety, awards, or some of them even have money, cash prizes, and all that sort of jazz. So yeah, absolutely, nothing but good things to say about game jams as long as they're run professionally.
So I don't know where else to interject this, but if you are going to go to a game jam or if you are going to work on a project, definitely have some sort of skill, I would say, other than being the idea guy.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk about idea guys.
Yeah, I was going to touch on it.
Okay. Do you mind if I bring it up now? Or do you
Yeah, go
okay.
please. Segue just fine.
No game studio needs an idea guy.
Yep.
There is no game studio out there who has a ton of talent who can make games, and they're just sitting around going, like, "Gee, I really wish someone would give me a game idea," because I don't know. I came into this not even liking games. I just make them, and I don't have any ideas of my own. So I really need someone to come in and tell me what to do. That doesn't happen. You're not going to get a job as a game designer right off the bat. You might get a job as a game designer after you're in the industry for like 15 plus years. Or if you're an indie developer and you can just start off the bat with game design, which is actually, I think, why we do what we do, because we wanted to design games, not just make 3D trees months on end.
Also worth mentioning, a game design position is also not what most people think it is too. Like, a game designer is not an idea guy. He doesn't just walk into a boardroom and go, "Let's make a game about a future guy who has roller skates and is in love with a chicken named Roberta. Go. Deadline in 6 months." Like, that's like that. Yeah. Like, that literally doesn't happen. That's a thing that does not factually exist. But designers themselves are much more like middle management. They don't actually design per se. They more get down into everybody's work schedule. Like, they go down the tree of people they work with and talk to them about what they're doing, and then they do a bounce back and forth ideas thing, and then they'll have a meeting with another group, and it's really more like a paperwork, middle management, communication job. Designer isn't design a game and have your team do it. Just so we're all clear.
So what's the difference between project manager, program manager, and designer?
Besides the studio. Basically, the larger your studio is, the more people you need to handle specific roles. In a small project like the ones we do, the project manager is usually the game designer. Usually the project manager on game design projects can do everyone else's job at a minimum level. Both of us can do art, programming. I can do a little bit of music. He does that. I do sound Foley, and then all the other technical stuff like making websites. We make it happen. A game designer, at least for an indie studio, needs to be able to wear a lot of hats, and so he's going to fill all those jobs that you're talking about. Or she.
This person, not sexist in any way. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Did you have your hand up, man? Oh, you had your, okay, okay. Well, that's completely dependent on what you want to do.
He's wrong, so. I'd pick something high level. So something that's easy to pick up, like C# or JavaScript. I tend to work in Unity a lot these days, and it sort of depends on the engine you're working with. Unity allows you to use JavaScript, C#, Vue, and something else.
That's Flash, doesn't it? They can import Flash stuff in there.
ActionScript?
I think so.
They,
I remember Jake saying something about that.
Yeah, not many people are using Flash these days.
yeah, Flash is definitely on the way out. I wouldn't recommend picking up ActionScript at this stage, but I would say C# is extremely portable. Most people who use Unity,
Sorry.
most people who program with Unity use C#. All of the Xbox Live Indie games were using XNA, which was a library for C#. Honestly, I would say C# is probably the most versatile language you can learn right now. JavaScript isn't bad because you can also use that in websites, and it's also pretty versatile. So those are the two main ones I'd recommend.
I still think it's up to you what your end goal is. If you want to end up a AAA designer, then yeah, what he's talking about is absolutely correct. But if your goal is to just learn how to program some stuff and get projects out the door, then I'd recommend, like, I use Game Maker Studio. I used it for a long time, and then I became friends with the people that run the studio. So now I get like free Game Makers for life, which is nice. And any personal help I need with stuff. Because I'm not a great coder. I'm more of an artist and musician. But but I get by. I can make it work. So if your goal is to just start to learn how programming functions and just start some small stuff, get something out the door, I'd recommend something more like that to get started. But yeah, if your end goal is, I know I want to work as a major in comp sci, I definitely want to be a programmer for a AAA student, then yeah, I would.
One more word on that.
You may.
So,
Die.
high-level languages like C# are usually very easy to pick up. Now, when you're talking about like comp-sci and something extremely intricate, you're talking more like C++ and more the low-level languages. Probably not sound good, but the nice thing about learning C# and JavaScript also is that if you go to a game jam, you'll be infinitely more useful because you know a language that basically everyone else there knows. If it's a game jam that has a lot of Game Maker people there, then learn how to use Game Maker. I don't know, does Game Maker have its own language?
GML.
Okay.
It's a lot like BASIC.
The other nice thing you'll notice is once you pick up one programming language, they're all pretty much the same. I can use JavaScript and C#, but I started with C# and it's just like a couple things change between those two. It's really not that much. With Game Maker, I imagine at least the logic is similar to any other programming language. You're always going to have arrays, you're always going to have dictionaries and variables and all that sort of stuff. And the way that and loops, if statements, and like the core building blocks of programming are going to be the same no matter what language you pick. So I would pick something easy to start with, and then once you have that, then you'll be able to pick up more and more languages very quickly.
Fact. See how I chimed in there at the end? Classic me. All right, so we're winding down. So the last thing I want to point out before I pass off to Eric for any of his final thoughts and then questions at the end is a lot of people tend to forget that we live in an age where information is like free. Like the internet is just the best thing in the world. Any resource, anything from YouTube tutorials to game facts information to like anything you want to know about gaming and game creation is online. Every bit of it, down to every last granular detail. I make myself available to people if you need help or just point you in a direction, so anybody can feel free to email me at any time, and I'll, judging what you need to send you in a direction. But I mean, Google is like the world's best thing, man. A lot of people will ask me questions that I'm like, just to Google it. I'm married, so I get a lot of questions where I'm like, just Google it. Just Google it. Just.
He's not looking to stay married.
It's not even true.
Just Google it.
It's not true.
How do I get to the place? Just Google it.
Like I want you to talk more than you already do.
So that's important to remember.
Well, when we're talking about, when I was just talking about C# and Java and those being used by a lot of people, the benefit to picking something that a lot of people use is that there's going to be a lot more information about any problem you might have if you pick something a lot of people use. So as much as you might love Python or Pascal or trying to optimize the exact game engine for what it is you want to do.
Mario Paint.
Yeah, if you use Mario Paint, you're pretty much screwed. The point being, if you pick Unity or if you pick Game Maker, you're going to find a lot of resources online to help you through any problems. That's the other thing is like, if you do happen to know a lot about C++ and all that, and you want to write your own game engine and all that, that's great. You're not going to have anybody's help at So you've got to be the very best, like no one ever was. And also, that type of an earlier point, when you're talking about just finding out if the game is fun, if you go and make your game engine and you find out it can't do anything people actually want to play, then you're kind of screwed. So I would, at the very least, Unity is very useful for prototyping. So make a prototype of your game.
All right, that's I guess that's all of the like pre kind of stuff that I took the time to write down as I came semi-prepared today. Does anybody have any questions about anything?
So like as a back-end person, you usually struggle with visuals, like as far as finding artists and stuff. So say I made like my first game, like how would I go about finding an artist that would help me do it for free, or like, is there a community somewhere?
In my experience, artists are much easier to find than programmers. I don't know if that's been the case with you.
Mostly, yeah.
Yeah. So game jams, you're going to see a lot of artistic types there. If you're in Baltimore, MICA, I believe they have a game program. University of Baltimore definitely has one since I got a degree from them. But basically, there are lots of liberal arts colleges that have people who are interested in games. So if you go out and you network, go to IGDA meetings, like I just showed earlier. If you network, you will find artists. Now, programmers are more difficult, and so my advice to an artist looking for a programmer is learn how to program.
That's what I had to do.
Yeah, you're unfortunately not going to find too many people who are into games and want to program and
Don't have like a creative.
and yeah, are lacking an idea of what they want to do, because programming types tend to always have a physics idea in mind. Or one of our programmers for our games now made like some non-Euclidean space game, and it's very pretty. I don't know what you do with it, just like wander around in 5D space, whatever it is.
It's very much like real life.
Yeah.
Just wander aimlessly in 5 directions.
On the same vein as the artwork, since you're a musician, a lot of people here are musicians, do you find that the people you hire for the music side of the games are more on the engineering side, as in the audio engineers, or are they more on the composer side? Do you hire both?
Most of the people I've worked with are both. I mean, like, because I learned, like when I was living with you, I learned a bit from you about mixing and mastering, because you went to, what was the school name?
Sheffield.
Sheffield. And so I was into composing, but then learned more about, again, like recording, mixing, and mastering. Most of the people I work with know, or at least have a grasp of all of those fields. I don't know too many people who specialize in one, but don't have at least a working knowledge of the others.
So sound design in games tends to be a contract role as opposed to a salary role. I know Bethesda, as of like Oblivion, had one sound guy on their team of like 200 people. It's a very specialized role. If you're very good at it, you can find work more easily than a lot of artists actually, because not a lot of people do it. But you will be expected to wear every audio hat possible in game design. So
composer, but engineer.
Yeah, composer, engineer. You'll probably also need to be able to
Sound
fix the microphones if they
Yeah.
break. There's a lot of stuff. You just mentioned Sheffield, and they have courses and all of that there too. They're in Phoenix. They're a decent school. If you're into sound.
I dig sound. Sounds pretty good.
I heard that 3D modelers were like in demand in the industry. Is that true?
I'd say more so 3D animators
Yeah.
than modelers.
People who can rig and animate.
Also, I feel like that's becoming less true more recently, because 3D modeling used to be more about moving vertices around and being highly technical, whereas programs like ZBrush that have come out are much easier for creative types to work with, and it actually produces better results than going in and just dropping vertices everywhere. It's more like you're molding something in it. And so it's more intuitive, but when you lower the barriers to entry, the market becomes more crowded. So animation is still difficult to do, although that's also being made easier by motion capture. There's still a lot of stuff you have to animate by hand, and you also have to clean up the motion capture. Also, rigging models is still in demand. So building the skeletons and wiring that up to the 3D models, for those of you who don't know what rigging is, that's a position unto itself. There are people who do nothing but that. They take other people's 3D models, put a skeleton in them, and wire those vertices up to the skeletons so that someone else can do an animate. You had a question?
Yeah, talking about earlier, and I've completely forgotten about Mega Man Rocks until you brought it up. A long time ago, I want to say maybe in like early 2009, Joystick ran an article that Eric, you've been working on Mega Man 9 HD.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to that? Was some legalese come into play with that?
A little bit. A friend of mine, who I wound up doing some work with, had a friend at Capcom that he showed Mega Man 9 HD 2, and he thought that would be helpful. Like, hey, look at the cool stuff my friend can do. Well, it didn't turn out to be as helpful as he thought, and because Mega Man 9 was still selling well at the time, because that was like not long, that was within the first year Mega Man 9 was out. That was a request of removal pretty quick. So.
Oh. So did you get any further than just the Galaxy Man stage that was created, or? Was
yeah, there's a version with there's another stage that was like mostly completed. I don't remember which one it was. I don't think it had the boss in, but yeah, there's another stage that was mostly done.
Interesting. Because with the way Capcom is right now, maybe that would be something they would be interested in hiring you to do, because they have no interest in reviving stuff, but they seem to be very open in taking fan projects, like the whole thing with Way Forward doing DuckTales Remastered last fall. They actually did that for them, and that's when Capcom reached out to Disney, which turned into the whole thing happening again. So, that's interesting. I didn't know that somebody was speaking on your behalf.
Again, it was well-intentioned. It just didn't go as well as... That was when I was still struggling to work with a AAA studio. I hadn't done any AAA work yet, so that was... he was trying to open a door for me.
Fascinating.
I mean, not that I'm on bad terms with Capcom or anything, but, you know, just pretty much that lawyer from Sony.
We got at least 2 minutes left if anyone else.
Has a 1 minute and 20-second question. Well, all right.
I would have more. So like I've worked with like 3D artist Maya a lot, and I'm about to graduate, so I don't have a student door anymore, if you will. How do you guys suggest that we continue to use Maya? Do you just have to go out and buy it, or?
I don't buy any of the products I use, mainly because they are all exorbitantly expensive. They are. It's not like I was gonna try something. And I'm being honest, man. Just kind of.
Way to expose the industry.
That's why I think a lot of people they just can't afford it.
So basically, what happens is, from what I understand, is that places like Adobe, they sell Photoshop and After Effects and those for exorbitant amounts of money, and they know that one-to-one consumers generally aren't going to buy it. They're doing it because when companies, like the studio I just came out of, buys license for Photoshop, they buy 2,000 licenses, which is a really big chunk of money. I have never heard of Adobe going after people individually for torrenting and pirating things, because from people I know who have worked with Adobe, they know people do, but they don't care when it happens on a one. They know and they don't care, because that's not where the money comes from. Of course, I have to officially say, buy everything you use, but realistically, for indie developers that have no money, a single Adobe product would bankrupt you in a second. Nevertheless, multiple products. You know, I have Power Director, I didn't pay for it. I have Reason, didn't pay for it. Photoshop, didn't pay for it.
You know, you're being videotaped.
Nope. But let me say clear, it's not because I don't want to pay the money, it's because do you expect a 1 or 2 man indie group working part-time jobs to afford an $1,000? I mean, that's just unrealistic and dumb. And much like the lawyers, can go fuck itself. So I guess since we're officially out of time and we don't want to take anybody else's time, I'll say thank you for coming and joining us.
Well,
We
one thing
appreciate it.
before people start leaving. I need to show my game before you all leave. We're in the game room, Neon FM, huge glowy thing, lights up the entire room. It's off in the corner. Head into the game room, turn to the left, corner back there. We have a tournament tonight at 8 p.m. So I haven't seen anyone who's amazing at the game yet here at MAGFest, so you have a chance if you sign up. There's one kid who's better than everybody else combined at the game, and he's not allowed to participate. He's also not here, so that helps. What? Neon FM?
Neon FM.
Neon FM.
It's a music game.
Music game, 5-panel.
Yeah.
That thing.
That was cool.
We got music from Monster Cat, and if you like electro house, and dubstep, and trap. I know how much you like trap, so I put that in there just for you. It also has girl spots. I know you're a big fan of that track.
All right, well, thank you everybody for coming. We appreciate it. If you have any questions,